New studies find the symptoms of the CCP virus far stranger than initially expected. What are COVID toes, and how can a patient have severe lack of oxygen without even realizing? Many children falling ill in China after ingesting fake baby formula. It's the latest of a series of cases involving problematic baby food. The WHO coming under increased global scrutiny for its handling of the pandemic, now rising tensions between the agency and Beijing over the virus investigation. And President Trump says U.S. funding for the WHO could drop by 90%. He talks about some of the reasoning behind this number. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The U.S., Canada, the U.K., France, Germany, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand have asked that Taiwan be invited to the WHO's virtual meeting starting May 18th. China has launched a counterattack, asking countries to co-sign a letter urging the WHO not to discuss Taiwan's participation at the meeting. In the confidential letter obtained by Foreign Policy, China asked the WHO to follow the One China principle and block Taiwan's participation at the meeting. The letter says controversial issues like Taiwan should not be discussed, and the meeting should focus on saving lives and not get distracted by political manipulation. Taiwan has only 440 confirmed cases so far and 7 deaths. It has a population of about 24 million and is only 110 miles from mainland China. Taiwan has never implemented any lockdown measures and is viewed as the world model for combating the CCP virus. There are tensions between the WHO and the Chinese regime over the investigation into the origin of the virus. The head of China's National Health and Welfare Commission said at a May 15th press conference that WHO never asked to visit the Wuhan P4 lab. This comes as a reporter questioned why China refused to let the WHO visit the Wuhan P4 lab. The spokesperson said China places great importance on cooperating with the WHO and reminded attendees that the WHO visited Wuhan for on-site inspections in January. But the WHO's representative in China, Dr. Gauden Galia, told Australian Sky News at the end of April that China refused to let the WHO investigate the virus's origin. 2 Turkish lawyers are suing the Chinese regime for damages. They allege China failed to control the epidemic and attempted to cover it up by silencing whistleblowers and underreporting the number of infections. Turkey has over 140,000 cases and nearly 4,000 deaths. That's according to the Johns Hopkins University. But many believe the number is much higher due to the number of people who haven't been tested. Many people think the CCP virus is just a dry cough or fever, but it's far more unpredictable than that. Virus patients are reporting a variety of symptoms, some as odd and mysterious as a loss of touch, red bumps on toes, and even life-threatening oxygen shortage that can go undetected by the patient. A new international study surveyed over 4,000 COVID-19 patients in a total of 40 countries. It concluded that the virus causes significant deterioration, not only in some people's smell and taste, but also in their sense of touch. This can help doctors diagnose CCP virus cases since nasal blockage from viral diseases like the cold or flu doesn't result in a sensory loss. There's also a skin condition known as COVID toes that's baffling doctors. It's a rash on the toes that appears as red or purple lesions. Researchers in Spain say the curious symptoms are increasingly being detected in COVID patients, especially children and young people. The lesions resemble those of chickenpox or measles that typically appear in winter and usually heal without leaving marks on the skin. Similar symptoms have been reported in Italy, France, and Spain. Another symptom is a sudden loss of consciousness or even death without warning signs. The phenomenon is called silent hypoxia, where the patient has dangerously low oxygen levels in the body but doesn't immediately develop shortness of breath. The patient is thus able to breathe and even talk normally, unaware of any danger. And the delayed symptoms can mean the situation becomes increasingly worse before the patient finally seeks medical help. Blood clots are also common. Michael Levy, a medical expert from Brown University, said last week that blood clotting has become, quote, probably the most important thing that's emerged over the last 2 months. It can cause dangers from life-threatening strokes and blood vessel blockage to skin lesions like COVID toes. And it can be days or even months after respiratory symptoms have resolved before it manifests. The unpredictable nature and odd symptoms of the CCP virus have left scientists around the world scratching their heads, and there are still no proven therapies for the disease. Multiple children have fallen ill in central China after they were fed fake baby formula. It's the latest of a series of cases involving problematic baby food.
Several children in China were sickened after being fed a protein drink sold as baby formula. The reports came from Chenzhou City in Hunan Province. According to Hunan TV, the children's heads began to deform after being fed a product called Bei'an Min. It's passed off as infant milk and sold to parents. The children developed eczema and lost weight. Some would repeatedly slap their heads uncontrollably. They were diagnosed with rickets, a softening and weakening of bones in children caused by malnutrition. It's unclear how long they were given the formula. One parent told Hunan TV when she bought the product, she noticed it had a protein drink label, but store clerks told her it was another name for baby formula. After being contacted by the media, the manufacturer said that the product had been discontinued, adding that it met quality standards for protein drinks. Local authorities are investigating. This is the second series of cases of formula-caused sickness in the same city within 1 year. In late March, at least 10 parents wrote a joint letter requesting an investigation. Their children's heads also became deformed after being fed a protein drink called Shuar Tai. The parents purchased the drink after it was recommended by doctors from a local children's hospital. Later, city authorities announced the doctors in question had been suspended for a year. They also said the affected children will be given health checks and the families will be compensated. But on Thursday, several parents told Beijing News that they hadn't received compensation and that no health checks were performed.
Why do cases like this keep happening after repeatedly being banned? The reason is simple. The so-called supervision is just a formality. For the perpetrators, after paying some money, everything is okay for them.
The reports come 12 years after China's tainted milk scandal, where massive amounts of milk powder were laced with melamine. The tainted milk powder killed half a dozen children and poisoned hundreds of thousands of others. Multiple top officials who were deemed responsible for the scandal were punished, but several of them were later reappointed to new positions. Among them was China's former head of the Food Safety Department. 6 years later, he became the director for drug safety. On his watch, an ongoing problem at the time, the production of substandard vaccines escalated, becoming the country's worst health crisis in years. Another of the officials, the former director of the National Quality Inspection Office, later became the National Deputy for Fighting Pornography and Illegal Publications. An investigation by Beijing News showed that between 2008 and 2014, 1/3 of the officials disciplined in various scandals were later given new posts. On the other hand, the father of a girl sickened by tainted milk was accused of blackmailing and jailed for 5 years. His daughter developed kidney stones from the laced milk. He campaigned for compensation from the formula maker, but the company sued him for extortion instead. Jiang Yalin's daughter also got kidney stones because of the contaminated milk.
Disasters happen again and again. The most important reason is that the perpetrators didn't receive severe punishment by the law, while the victims have not received fair and reasonable compensation.
Both Jiang and He say if the system doesn't change, cases like these will continue to happen.
President Trump says U.S. funding for the WHO could drop by 90%. He talks about some of the reasoning behind this figure.
President Trump clarified one way the administration was considering changing U.S. funding of the WHO. He said the U.S. might only give the same amount of money the Chinese regime gives. President Trump responded to a Twitter post from Fox Business anchor Lou Dobbs. Lou, this is just one of numerous concepts being considered, under which we would pay 10% of what we have been paying over many years, matching much lower China payments. It means instead of paying over $400 million, the U.S. would drop payments to no more than $40 million. Trump stopped funding the WHO last month. He's mentioned before how early in the virus pandemic, the WHO opposed travel bans and how the organization is too close with communist China. The head of the WHO and another official in the organization repeatedly praised Beijing's virus response efforts. But the praise is raising suspicions now in light of the regime's cover-up of the virus's danger. WHO officials reject notions they are close with Beijing and say cuts in funding would hurt their efforts to stem the virus. Trump administration officials have suggested directing money to groups like the Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders instead.
The latest legal clash over a governor's lockdown measures is happening in Michigan. Residents and some officials have filed at least 3 lawsuits against Governor Gretchen Whitmer since mass closures began there.
The issue here.
A Michigan judge listened to arguments Friday about whether the governor's lockdown orders are within legal boundaries.
You know, we take this seriously. This is not a suggestion. These are not thoughts about how you can protect yourself. This is the force of law, and we expect people to follow the law.
The state has seen some of the most heated protests in the nation. Some protesters even came armed. The Republican-led legislature says the governor's taken her power under the law too far.
This case is instead about a question of whether a governor, this governor, or any governor in the future can exercise effectively a limitless, unilateral, temporally unbounded authority.
Pointing out the governor's suggestion that a full reopening could be held off until a vaccine is created. The lawyer defending the governor says the case is absurd.
There's no dispute that a disaster and emergency exists.
House and Senate leaders criticize the governor for choosing a broad approach to reopening instead of a regional one, since some areas haven't been hit as hard by the virus. The judge didn't make a decision, instead predicting that the case would end up going to the Supreme Court, much like the Wisconsin case, where the governor lost, paving the way for bars and restaurants to reopen. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Michigan's governor has not set a date when retailers and other companies can reopen. The state now has more than 50,000 cases of the CCP virus, and tens of thousands have recovered. Half of the state hardest hit by the virus has started reopening. That's according to the governor, who also said the plan is to reopen businesses without the crowds and a phased approach. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on what's good to go.
Business owners in certain industries have been given the green light to start reopening in at least half of New York's regions. Horses and race cars will be allowed to hit the tracks by June 1st with some restrictions, no fans. The governor said the plan is to have economic activity without risking a spike in infections.
Or what economic activity is willing to reopen without a crowd, right? They're talking about this in terms of sports. You can have baseball without a crowd, but it can still be televised.
Construction, manufacturing, and other industries are opening in 5 out of the state's 10 regions, but New York City, the epicenter of the pandemic, is still under tight orders. The peak number of new cases in a day was about 1,200 this week. Compare that to 6,300 at the height of New York's pandemic. It's a big drop. When asked about restaurants suffering under the shutdown yesterday, Mayor Bill de Blasio said business owners he spoke to have showed support for the restrictions.
And in fact, I think I mentioned a number of them said they don't feel they can come back effectively until they can get to higher capacity and have fewer restrictions to create the right atmosphere. So this is an ongoing conversation.
But an upside for New Yorkers, they're still able to come out to enjoy the weekend heat with social distancing restrictions attached. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
A new study is out showing more than a third of CCP virus patients also developed acute kidney failure. A doctor working on the study says the findings can help hospitals plan for another possible wave of the virus.
A new study from New York suggests patients with the CCP virus could be at risk of developing kidney failure. The study's co-author, Dr. Kenner Javeri, says over a third of the patients in the study developed kidney injury.
We studied patients from March 1st to April 5th at our 13 academic institutions, and of the 5,449 patients, 36.6% of them developed acute renal failure or kidney injury.
The patient's kidneys couldn't filter out the waste from their blood. The condition developed at 2 stages.
Most of the kidney failure occurred very early on during the admission, if it did occur. So that was a very interesting finding. And the other thing was it was happening very proximate to mechanical ventilation.
14% of patients with kidney injury needed dialysis to filter out the waste products from their blood. Javeri says though the numbers are shocking, there is likely a cause.
So I don't think this is COVID related. Any sort of sick condition, could be a heart attack, could be a flu, if you're getting that sick that you require, ventilation and in the ICU, the kidneys can get affected.
Javeri says the study's results could prove useful for hospitals managing logistics during the pandemic. The study was conducted by a team at Northwell Health, the largest health provider in New York State.
British researchers are looking for a new way to detect the virus in people with the help of man's best friend.
British researchers are trying to find out if dogs can be trained to sniff out people infected with the CCP virus, even before they show symptoms. It's proven that dogs can detect certain diseases like malaria. Now it's up to the researchers to find out if the same goes for the virus. In order to do it, they have to collect samples from people that are infected as well as from those that aren't.
We're asking people to wear these face masks for a few hours, and then we carefully collect those. And the other thing we're going to do is get people to wear nylon socks.
The socks used are an effective, easy way to collect odors from people. If the dogs prove themselves able to detect the virus, they will be put to work at British borders. There, they will help stop people from importing the virus.
So in order to get the economy going again, we've got to open up our airports. And we think the dogs can play a really great role here.
The researchers say their goal is that dogs will be used around the world as a non-invasive means of detecting the disease.
In our global news briefs today, Singapore reported over 460 new virus cases, and beaches in parts of Europe are opening up again.
Singapore registered over 460 new infections, taking the country's total to over 27,000 cases. The vast majority of those newly infected are migrant workers living in dormitories. 4 are permanent residents. Singapore also reported one more fatality, bringing the death toll in the island nation to 22. In Italy, all travel curbs to the country will be lifted from June 3rd. The government announced the decision on Saturday in an effort to salvage the upcoming vacation season. Shops and restaurants across the country are preparing to reopen with strict social distancing and hygiene rules. Thousands of Greeks flocked to the seaside on Saturday when more than 500 organized beaches reopened. Authorities lifted lockdown on the beaches sooner than expected in response to a heat wave with temperatures surging over 100 degrees. And the French city of Nice also opened some of its beaches. Despite cloudy weather, residents in the French Riviera put on their bathing suits and cooled down in the sea. But they were banned from sitting or sunbathing by the shore.
A California produce packaging supplier is experiencing the boom and burden of the CCP virus. It's seeing a huge increase in sales as well as expenses to keep the workplace safe.
For some U.S. companies like California's Emerald Packaging, the coronavirus outbreak is both a boon to sales and still a burden. As the nation clamped down earlier this year with stay-at-home orders, demand for plastic bags of produce exploded. Emerald Packaging owner Kevin Kelly, who sells plastic packaging for food like licorice and cauliflower florets, says consumers saw packaged goods as safer than unwrapped produce.
So in March, literally probably in those 3 weeks in March, our year-over-year in bookings increased 150%. And then in April, they increased 10% again.
But while the novel coronavirus changed consumer habits, it also forced expensive changes at the company, about $350,000 in new and unexpected costs.
For instance, we have 6 people walking around the factory right now, cleaning full-time, 2 each shift, and they're cleaning all the spaces that the people who run the machinery don't clean. So guardrails, desks, bathrooms.
$10,000 was spent on 6 high-tech backpacks that these workers now use to hose down floors. The company is also taking temperature checks seriously, no matter the price tag.
Right now we're using the guns that you point to someone's forehead, but we just spent $42,000 on a new system that will automate temperature checking as people walk in. So it's a computer system. It infrared, it picks up someone's temperature as they walk through the system. But still, it's $40,000 for 2 systems. And that isn't a capital expense we planned for this year. Wasn't in the budget.
Kelly says he hasn't increased his prices yet because he knows many customers are in a pinch. Recently, Kelly's biggest customer told him it was looking around at even cheaper options.
With many gyms still closed, people are looking to transform their homes into fitness centers as a new alternative. There's now an increase in demand for exercise equipment.
Out of concern that crowded areas could cause another rise in virus cases, fitness centers and outdoor gyms have been ordered to remain closed. To cope, many people are now ordering exercise equipment as a way to bring the gym into their homes.
When I canceled that membership, the first thing I did was get a bench and barbell so I could continue some of the weight training I was doing.
The gym equipment seems to be beneficial for both parents and their children. One mother decided to order a trampoline for her 3 kids.
And the reason we did that was because the kids were waking up in the morning with a ton of energy, and we did not have a way to get out all this pent-up energy.
Some say the gym equipment can help prevent people from turning into couch potatoes while under quarantine.
I was afraid to, one, get out of shape, and two, I'm staying inside and working on my computer all day, and I needed a change, and I needed structure to my life.
Fitness equipment company Rep Fitness is mobilizing its workforce and calling for more manufacturing to meet the new demand.
We've doubled our capacity as far as how much we can produce, so our manufacturing capacity has doubled, and we've been hiring as quickly as we can.
Rep Fitness co-founder Ryan McGrotty is advising other fitness equipment companies to change their business models in order to stay afloat.
Here at China in Focus, we dedicate ourselves to bringing you truthful, unbiased reporting. Don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates, and see you next time.